Many relationships do not collapse because love disappears, but because too many voices enter a space meant for two. When guidance turns into control, love slowly forgets how to breathe. What seems like care can quietly become the very thing that breaks connection. Love is not a thing you can hold tightly in your hands and expect it to flourish. It is more like a living organism, a plant that grows only when there is space for air, light, and movement. The moment we surround it with too many hands, too many instructions, too many expectations, it begins to wither. This is where many relationships quietly begin to struggle, not because love is absent, but because freedom is. When two people come together, they are not asking the world for permission to love. They are entering an unknown territory where they must learn each other through experience, mistakes, joy, and pain. Parental interference, even when well-intentioned, often removes this essential space. It replaces discovery with direction. Instead of asking, "What do we feel?" the couple begins asking, "What will they think?" Alan Watts often spoke about how control is born from fear. Parents interfere not because they want to destroy love, but because they are afraid their child will suffer, fail, or repeat mistakes. But fear does not create wisdom. It creates tension. And when fear enters a relationship from the outside, love slowly becomes cautious instead of creative. Without space, partners stop listening to their own intuition. Decisions are no longer made from presence, but from anxiety. Every argument feels heavier. Every disagreement feels dangerous, because it is no longer just between two people. It now carries invisible observers. Love becomes a performance rather than a connection. True intimacy requires privacy. It requires the freedom to be wrong, to grow awkwardly, to figure things out without an audience. When parents remain emotionally involved in every decision, the relationship never learns how to stand on its own feet. It remains dependent, fragile, and unsure of itself. And here is the deeper truth. Love does not need protection. It needs trust. When parents trust the relationship, they allow it to develop strength. When they interfere, they unknowingly communicate doubt. And doubt, repeated over time, slowly erodes confidence between partners. Space is not rejection. Space is respect. Space is saying, "I believe you can find your way." When a couple is given room to breathe, they learn responsibility. They learn compromise. They learn emotional maturity. Without that space, love stays immature, always leaning on others, never becoming whole. So the question is not whether parents care. Of course they do. The question is whether care is expressed as guidance or as control. Because love that is constantly supervised never learns how to trust itself. Have you ever felt that outside interference affected your relationship, positively or negatively? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else see their situation more clearly. There is a delicate line between guidance and control, and most relationships are quietly damaged the moment that line is crossed. Guidance is offered with open hands, control is enforced with invisible strings. At first, the difference is subtle. Advice sounds caring, opinions sound protective. But over time, these gentle suggestions harden into expectations, and expectations slowly become commands. Parents often believe they are helping by staying involved. They say, "We know better," or "We've lived longer." And perhaps they have. But wisdom that is imposed does not enlighten, it suffocates. A relationship cannot grow by borrowing another generation's certainty. It must earn its own understanding through lived experience. Alan Watts frequently reminded that life cannot be lived secondhand. When parents begin making emotional, financial, or personal decisions for a couple, the couple stops living their own life. They begin living a script written by someone else. And the tragedy is not rebellion, it is quiet resentment. Control rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives disguised as concern. It shows up as constant questioning, unsolicited advice, comparisons with other couples, or emotional pressure masked as what's best for you. Slowly, partners stop asking each other what they want. They start asking their parents instead. love becomes hesitant. Decisions feel heavy. Confidence erodes. When control enters a relationship, responsibility leaves. The couple no longer feels fully accountable for their choices because they were never truly allowed to make them. And without responsibility, there can be no maturity. Without maturity, there can be no deep trust between partners. This is where conflict multiplies. One partner may feel torn between loyalty to their parents and commitment to their relationship. The other may feel invisible, unheard, or constantly judged. Over time, love becomes strained not by what the couple disagrees about, but by who holds the power behind the scenes. Control also kills emotional safety. Partners stop being honest, not with each other, but with the people controlling them. They hide problems, they pretend everything is fine, and suppressed truth always finds a way to resurface, usually as anger, distance, or emotional withdrawal. The painful irony is this: parents who control too tightly often end up losing the closeness they were trying to preserve. Instead of creating security, they create separation. Instead of protecting love, they weaken it. True guidance steps back. True wisdom knows when to be silent. True care trusts growth more than obedience. A relationship becomes strong when two people feel free enough to choose each other, not because they are told to, but because they genuinely want to. Control removes choice, and love without choice is no longer love, it becomes duty. To love is to allow, to interfere constantly is to doubt, and no relationship thrives under doubt. Have you experienced a situation where guidance crossed into control in your relationship? Share your story in the comments. Your insight may help someone recognize what they're silently enduring. There is a quiet pain that arises when love is forced to compete with loyalty. It does not arrive with shouting or drama. It arrives as hesitation, a pause before answering a question, a careful choice of words, a sense that no response will ever be entirely right. This is the inner conflict created when parental interference divides the heart of a relationship. A partner caught between their parents and their relationship often feels as though they are standing on a narrow bridge, pulled from both sides. To choose the partner feels like betrayal. To choose the parents feels like abandonment. And so instead of choosing, they delay, avoid, or remain silent. But silence is not neutral. Silence is a decision that slowly erodes intimacy. Alan Watts spoke often about divided minds, how inner conflict creates outer suffering. When a person is emotionally split, they cannot be fully present. They may be physically in the relationship, but emotionally they are elsewhere, constantly negotiating approval, managing expectations, and fearing disapproval. Love begins to feel like a burden rather than a refuge. This loyalty conflict subtly reshapes behavior. The partner may defend their parents even when harm is obvious. They may minimize their partner's feelings, saying, "They didn't mean it like that," or "You're overthinking." Not because the partner is wrong, but because acknowledging the truth would force an impossible choice. Over time, the other partner feels increasingly alone. They may sense that no matter how gently they express their pain, it will always be weighed against parental opinion. Their emotions feel secondary. Their voice feels conditional. And nothing damages love more deeply than the feeling of being emotionally unsupported. Resentment grows quietly here. It does not explode, it accumulates. Every dismissed concern becomes another layer. Every moment of emotional abandonment becomes another distance. The relationship starts to weaken not from arguments, but from unresolved loyalty tensions that never find honest expression. What makes this conflict so destructive is that it is rarely named. Couples argue about surface issues, money, boundaries, decisions, but beneath it all lies the unspoken question, if I am hurt, will you stand with me? When the answer feels uncertain, trust dissolves. Parental interference intensifies this division by keeping the partner emotionally dependent. As long as approval is externally sourced, internal unity cannot form. A relationship becomes strong only when two people stand side by side, not when one stands behind another voice. True maturity is not rejecting parents, nor is it obeying them blindly. It is the ability to love without surrendering autonomy. It is choosing partnership without guilt. Loyalty does not mean lifelong submission. It means gratitude without emotional captivity. When a partner learns to resolve this inner conflict, something powerful happens. They stop seeking permission to love. They stop apologizing for choosing their relationship. And in that moment, trust is restored, not just between partners, but within themselves. A relationship does not need perfect parents. It needs present partners. It needs unity over divided allegiance. Love flourishes when loyalty is aligned, not conflicted. Have you ever felt torn between your parents and your partner, or been with someone who was? Share your experience in the comments. Your honesty might help someone realize they're not alone in this silent struggle. One of the most subtle ways parental interference damages a relationship is not through control, but through emotional dependency. It is easy to mistake this dependency for love, respect, or loyalty, but in truth, it is fear wearing the mask of devotion, and fear has no place in a healthy partnership. Many adults never fully separate emotionally from their parents. They may live independently, earn their own income, and make daily decisions alone. Yet inside, their emotional compass still points backward. Approval becomes a need. Disapproval becomes a threat. Every important choice is filtered through the question, what will they think? Alan Watts often spoke about the illusion of security, how clinging to external authority feels safe, but quietly robs us of inner strength. In relationships, this illusion shows up when a partner cannot stand firmly beside the person they love, without first checking for parental approval. Love becomes conditional. Commitment becomes hesitant. In such dynamics, the relationship stops being a partnership and starts becoming a triangle. Decisions are no longer made between two equals, but indirectly influenced by a third voice that is not present, yet always felt. The couple may discuss plans, but the final decision is shaped elsewhere. This creates imbalance. One partner feels equal, the other feels managed. Emotional dependency also weakens. Boundaries. A partner may overshare private matters with parents, not out of malice, but out of habit. Conflicts that should be resolved within the relationship are exposed to outside judgment. Once that door opens, trust quietly slips away. Intimacy cannot survive where privacy is absent. The partner on the receiving end often feels invisible. They may think, why am I here if my feelings are always compared, filtered, or overridden? Over time, they stop speaking freely, not because they have nothing to say, but because they no longer feel safe being heard. This dependency creates a strange contradiction. The person appears loyal, obedient, and respectful, yet emotionally unavailable. Their energy is divided. Their presence is partial. They may love deeply, but they cannot fully commit because their emotional center of gravity lies elsewhere. True partnership requires emotional adulthood. It is the ability to say, I hear my parents, but I stand here. It is understanding that love does not mean replacing one authority with another, but becoming responsible for your own emotional life. When emotional dependency dissolves, something remarkable happens. The relationship breathes. Decisions become shared rather than delayed. Conversations become honest rather than guarded. Love stops feeling like a risk and starts feeling like a choice. Parental love can remain meaningful without controlling direction. Respect can exist without surrendering autonomy. A mature relationship does not reject family. It simply refuses to be ruled by fear of disappointment. When two people stand together emotionally, interference loses its power. Not through rebellion, but through clarity. Not through anger, but through grounded presence. A strong relationship is not built on borrowed approval. It is built on shared responsibility. It is built on two adults choosing each other freely. Have you experienced a relationship where emotional dependency quietly replaced true partnership? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone recognize what they're feeling but haven't yet named. There is a quiet moment in many relationships when something changes. No argument happens. No harsh words are spoken. Yet decisions begin to feel unfamiliar. Plans that once felt mutual start to drift. Not because love is gone, but because another voice has slowly entered the room. a voice that is not physically present, yet powerfully influential. Parental opinions often begin as guidance. They sound reasonable, protective, even wise. After all, parents carry years of experience, and their concern may come from love. But as Alan Watts gently reminds us, wisdom becomes a burden when it replaces personal awareness. Advice becomes interference when it begins to override lived experience. At first, the influence is subtle. A comment here, a suggestion there. Are you sure this is the right time? That doesn't seem practical. We did it differently. None of these statements sound destructive, yet over time they shape decisions more than the relationship itself. What slowly happens is this: choices stop being made from the center of the relationship and start being filtered through inherited expectations. Career moves, living arrangements, marriage timing, finances, even emotional boundaries all begin to pass through an invisible approval system. And the partner who is not part of that system begins to feel sidelined. This is not because parents are intentionally harmful. It is because their worldview belongs to a different chapter of life. They are solving problems from a past that no longer exists. When their opinions dominate, the relationship stops evolving organically and starts following a script written for another generation. Alan Watts spoke about how society conditions us to seek permission instead of understanding. In relationships, this conditioning shows up when one partner hesitates to move forward without parental reassurance. Love becomes cautious. Spontaneity disappears. The relationship loses its natural rhythm. The most painful part is the erosion of trust. When one partner senses that decisions are being influenced elsewhere, they begin to doubt their place. They may ask themselves, am I building a life with this person? Or am I negotiating with an unseen committee? Over time, this dynamic creates emotional distance. One partner becomes defensive, the other becomes conflicted. Neither feels fully seen, neither feels fully chosen. And love, which thrives on clarity, begins to shrink under constant uncertainty. True partnership requires courage. The courage to disappoint others without betraying oneself. It means honoring parents without surrendering authorship of one's life. Mature love says, I listen, but I decide. When decisions return to the relationship, something shifts. Conversations deepen. Confidence returns. The couple begins to move as a unit again, rather than in fragments pulled by outside opinions. Respect grows not only between partners, but also from parents who eventually sense strength rather than obedience. A relationship cannot survive on borrowed choices. It needs lived decisions. It needs two people willing to stand by what they choose, together. Have you ever felt that outside? Opinions slowly changed the direction of your relationship? Share your experience in the comments. Your insight could help someone realize they're not alone. There is a delicate line between guidance and judgment. At first, it is almost invisible. A raised eyebrow, a silence that feels heavier than words, a comparison made casually, as if it means nothing. Yet slowly, this line is crossed. And what once felt like support begins to feel like scrutiny in many relationships. Parental interference reaches its most damaging form when parents stop seeing their child as an independent adult and start evaluating the relationship as a verdict to be delivered. Love becomes something to be approved or rejected rather than understood. And this subtle shift changes everything. Alan Watts often spoke about how humans seek authority figures to tell them whether they are doing life correctly. When parents take on the role of judges, they reinforce this dependency. Instead of asking, how do you feel in this relationship? The focus becomes, does this relationship meet our standards? And standards, once imposed, quietly replace intimacy. Judgment creates fear. The child begins to measure their happiness against parental reactions. Joy becomes cautious. Excitement is muted. Even genuine love is expressed with hesitation because it might not be received well. The relationship no longer lives freely, it performs. For the partner on the outside, this feels deeply unsettling. They sense they are being observed rather than welcomed. Every action becomes evidence. Every mistake feels permanent. They are not allowed to grow naturally into the family. They must prove their worth continuously. Love, under examination cannot relax. This dynamic creates a silent hierarchy, parents at the top, the relationship below. Decisions are no longer negotiated between two equals, but filtered through anticipated approval. And the more this happens, the weaker the emotional bond between partners becomes. Not because love is absent, but because autonomy is. Alan Watts reminded us that real maturity begins when we stop needing validation from those who raised us. This does not mean rejection or rebellion. It means recognizing that parental love is not the same as parental authority. When parents become judges, they unknowingly step into a role that damages the very thing they wish to protect. Over time, resentment grows quietly. One partner may feel constantly defended but never fully chosen. The other feels torn between loyalty and love. And eventually, both feel misunderstood by each other and by the family surrounding them. The antidote is clarity. Support listens. Judgment evaluates. Support asks questions. Judgment issues conclusions. A relationship thrives when parents shift from "is this right for you?" to "are you happy, and how can we support you?" True love requires emotional sovereignty, the ability to stand in your choices without fear of verdicts. When couples reclaim this space, something remarkable happens. The relationship breathes again. Conversations soften. And parents, seeing strength instead of dependence, often step back naturally. Love does not need judges. It needs witnesses, people who can observe without controlling. Have you ever felt judged rather than supported by family in your relationship? Share your story in the comments. Your voice might help someone find the courage to set healthy boundaries. One of the most painful misunderstandings in relationships is the belief that loyalty means obedience. It begins innocently enough. A child grows up learning to respect their parents, to listen, to comply. This is natural, even necessary in early life. But when adulthood arrives, something must change. Respect should remain, obedience should not. And yet, many relationships quietly suffer because this transition never happens. Alan Watts often spoke about how human beings remain psychologically tied to their parents long after physical dependence ends. When this bond remains unexamined, loyalty becomes a chain rather than a connection. The individual feels torn between honoring their parents and honoring their partner. And in trying to please both, they end up betraying the relationship they are building. In this confusion, obedience disguises itself as virtue. The person says, "I don't want to hurt my parents," but what they often mean is, "I'm afraid to disappoint them." Fear replaces clarity. Choices are no longer made from love, but from avoidance. And love, when shaped by fear, begins to shrink. For the partner, this is deeply destabilizing. They feel as though they are in a relationship with three people, not two. Every disagreement is weighed against how it will be perceived by the family. Every boundary feels negotiable. Slowly, trust erodes, not because affection is missing, but because commitment feels conditional. Watts reminded us that true loyalty comes from presence, not submission. You cannot be loyal to a relationship if your primary allegiance lies elsewhere. This does not mean rejecting family. It means understanding that adulthood demands a shift in responsibility. You are no longer living life for approval. You are living it for truth. When loyalty is confused with obedience, personal growth is stalled. The individual never fully steps into their own authority. Decisions feel heavy, guilt-ridden, and endlessly delayed, and relationships cannot thrive in this suspended state. Love needs decisiveness. It needs someone who can say, "This is my choice," without apology. Over time, this inner conflict surfaces as frustration. Arguments repeat themselves without resolution. Promises feel uncertain. The partner who waits for clarity begins to feel invisible. They are asked to be patient, understanding, accommodating, but never fully chosen. The solution is not confrontation, but consciousness. Loyalty must be redefined. Loyalty is not saying yes to your parents at the cost of your partner. Loyalty is being honest about your values and standing in them with compassion. It is the courage to disappoint others rather than betray yourself. When this shift occurs, something profound happens. Relationships gain weight, words carry meaning again. Parents, though initially resistant, often adjust when they sense firmness grounded in respect. And the individual finally experiences what Alan Watts described as psychological freedom, the freedom to act without inner division. A relationship does not ask you to abandon your roots. It asks you to grow beyond them. Have you ever felt torn between family loyalty and your relationship? Share your experience. NCE in the comments. Your insight could help someone navigate this difficult balance. Fear of conflict is one of the quietest yet most destructive forces in any relationship. At first, it seems harmless, even virtuous. We tell ourselves that avoiding disagreements preserves harmony, that conceding a point here and there keeps peace, and that if we never rock the boat, love will continue smoothly. But Alan Watts reminds us that avoidance is not the same as harmony. It is silence masquerading as consent, and over time, it erodes the very foundation of connection. When fear of conflict governs behavior, communication becomes shallow. Partners stop sharing their true feelings, desires, and concerns. They measure their words carefully, walking on emotional eggshells. Every conversation is filtered through the lens of, will this upset them? Will this cause tension? In this environment, authenticity is replaced by caution, and closeness gradually gives way to distance. The love is still there, but it is muted, restrained, and fragile. Conflict, paradoxically, is not the enemy of relationships. Stagnation is. Watts often pointed out that life is dynamic, constantly in flux, and human relationships mirror this natural movement. When we refuse to address disagreements, we deny this flow. Problems that could have been resolved early fester quietly, manifesting later as resentment, passive aggressiveness, or silent withdrawal. The couple may appear content on the surface, but beneath lies a tension that is both invisible and toxic. Fear of conflict also prevents growth. Each unresolved issue is an opportunity to understand oneself and the partner better. Every disagreement, when handled with respect and clarity, deepens intimacy and strengthens trust. But when fear prevails, lessons are lost. Partners adapt to the silence, not to the truth. They learn to tolerate, to sidest, to avoid discomfort. And in doing so, they miss the richness that vulnerability can bring to love. Moreover, the fear of conflict often originates from deeper psychological patterns, many traced back to parental influence. Individuals conditioned to appease authority figures, avoid disapproval, or suppress emotions may carry this same pattern into romantic relationships. Without awareness, this fear continues unconsciously, shaping interactions in ways that feel natural but are actually harmful. The antidote, Watts suggests, is courage paired with presence. True intimacy requires the willingness to express oneself fully, even if it means temporary discomfort. It is the courage to say, "This matters to me," while remaining open to listening. It is not aggression, blame, or defensiveness. It is clarity and honesty delivered with respect. Conflict, when approached in this way, transforms from a threat into a pathway for deeper connection. By facing disagreements rather than avoiding them, relationships become resilient. Partners learn to navigate tension without fear, understanding that love is not weakened by honest expression. It is strengthened by it. The bond grows richer, more authentic, and capable of withstanding the inevitable challenges life presents. Ultimately, fear of conflict keeps relationships fragile because it sacrifices truth for comfort. But when couples embrace open communication, they discover that true harmony is not the absence of disagreement. It is the presence of understanding and mutual respect. Have you ever avoided conflict in your relationship out of fear? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story could inspire someone to embrace honest communication and strengthen their bond.